What's up, amigos? Coming Jaime here today, and we're doing another deck profile on CFV Plus. I discovered a cheat code, and I was able to change the background. If you want to know the secret, just let me know. But for real, MachinaBlau, thanks again for the program. I'm actually having really fun with creating deck profiles with this, so this is going to be the second one. This is going to cover 7Cs for standard, and I know that a lot of people have been very excited for Night Rose, but have kind of forgotten about 7Cs, and I just wanted to show off a template deck profile that you guys can try it out and go from there, tweak it as you fit. It's a deck that honestly may depend on your metagame. You may have to tweak some cards. Night Rose is a little more resilient, and I'll talk about a little bit about the pros, weaknesses, and comparisons with the deck, so that way there's a level of understanding at that point. So let's start diving into the deck. So I'm going to load it up right now. And as you can see, we have our grade 3, Lord of the 7Cs, Night Mist. So he has, and I'll quote on this, for every 7Cs unit, they all have the on-hit attack skill where you get a treasure marker. The treasure markers really are based off Night Mist and Slash Shade, for example, and even Rice Tutor. So for example, with Night Mist, he has the continuous Vanguard skill where he gets all the effects depending on how many treasure markers that you have. So if you have for one or more, then all your rearguards with 7Cs can attack from the back row and also intercept well. And that's actually relevant at that point. Intercepting from the back row is key in this deck as well. And then once you get 3 or more, then during your turn, all your units get additional 5k. So they have this 5k bonus, kind of like Night Rose's blanket of 5k to each rearguard when they attack, but this is just a blanket 5k in general for all 7Cs units. And then once you have 6 or more, then at the end of the battle that this unit attack, you can stand all your rearguards with 7Cs in the name. So you can actually have 11 attacks, and that's actually very absurd if you think about it for standard. So the deck, win con is really applying pressure and being that beat down deck where you're getting your treasure markers. And ultimately, if you can get the 6, then you can have that 11 attack turn if you can. We're going to be piggybacking off Slash It for most of the time. So for example, what Slash It even does is that basically when he attacks, you can choose, he has the on-hit skill, of course, but during your turn, if there's a marker on this unit circle, he gets an additional 15k. So he's like the Coral Assault, but for Grand Blue in this case, outside of Ghost Ship, but at the same time, it says marker. So it's not just limited to treasure markers. For example, you can use the Protect 2 marker. It's maybe the right call, maybe not be the right call. It just really depends on your matchup, so definitely get some practice in at that point. But this guy is our 24k beater, and then with Night Mist's skill is going to give it another 5k, making it a 29k beater. So it's like Ghost Ship for Night Rose, but with Slash Shape with 7Cs. And you can get a bunch of these, and you can keep them in the back row, so that way they can attack from the back row and are safe from attacks. You're not going to get away from Retire clans or clans that bind, especially bind. They hurt like hell. But with the Retire clans, they are going to retire your Slash Shades, but there are methods of actually reviving your 7Cs units, especially if you're milling or discarding them, that you can get. And that unit is Night Spinal. Night Spinal is that one place, kind of last one, put 2 cards from the top of your deck to the drop zone, call up to go on card with 7C's name, not including this unit, and call it to rearguard circle. So this is your revival for 7C's, and it has the 7C's name, and again, it has the on-hit skill to get a treasure marker. So this is going to be a vital piece on not only building up your drop zone, but it also really dictates the quality of your drop zone, because you're looking for 7C's units. Where we have his brother from another mother, Pirate Swordsman Columbar, which is a great generic card for Grand Blue, so we definitely recommend playing this card. So when plays, kind of blast 1, search your deck, fetch anything, put it in the drop zone, and revive anything. And this is very key. Now, he is not a 7C's unit, and so what I recommend is that when you call this card to rearguard circle, there's going to be certain cards that make this a lot more fluid for the deck. So I'll skip over to the grade 1 real quick with Nightcrow. So Nightcrow, for example, in the drop zone, it has a drop zone effect. So when your Vanguard with 7Cs has a name, you can Soul Blast 1, retire rearguard, not name itself, and then call this to rearguard circle. So you can actually fetch out Nightcrawl, call another 7C's unit, let's say Night Spinal or Slash Shade, use Nightcrawl to actually retire the Columbar, and boom, you got 2 7C's units now on board that you can work with, and still apply that pressure of the treasure marker gaining. So that's very vital, and so be mindful of that, so that way when they're intercepting or blocking their attacks, your attacks, that you're not getting treasure markers, they'll let the generic units like Columbard and Negerbone, for example, actually hit. So you want to be mindful of that, and if you can actually maximize on the number of attacks that are just 7Cs, then they're bound to let you hit, and get your treasure markers to 1, 2, 3 to 6. Ideally, if you can get to 3 treasure markers as fast as possible, that's great because you get the power and you get the ability to intercept and attack from the back row. So those are very key things. And obviously the 6 or more is our win con at that point. What helps with that as well, with Negro Lazy, one place you can call grade 0 from your drop zone to rear guard circle. Now, and Amis's4 comment in his video is that this was the biggest disappointment in Night Rose, but it's actually very useful in 7Cs. And it's because we're restricted to Gaul grade 0s, but it is free. You'll notice with Column Bard, and of course Night Spinal, they're the units so far that are Counterblast heavy as well. Our Vanguard does not cost any Counterblast. Where Night Rose did cost a Counterblast to call something, Night Mist doesn't revive stuff, so we're counting on Night Spinal and Column Bard to revive stuff, but we also have access to Negro Lazy where we can actually call something for free. And that's very vital because 7C's got the grade 0 where it's Night Runner. Night Runner has the skill where you can bind this unit from rear guard circle, mill the top 2 cards from drops into the drop zone, and you can grab a card with 7C's from the drop zone and add it to your hand. So it is the Greed Shade version for 7C's at that point. So that way you have the name, and not only that, he also has the on his skill. So if you do have to call it an attack with it, that's an option. But ultimately, you can chain these attacks, and you can set up your board in such a way that you can fix your field, so by the time you are in your battle phase, you can be effective at that point. So for example, you can go Night Spinal into Night Runner, and then Night Runner can get you maybe a Column Bard or not a Column Bard, another 7C's unit like Slash Shade. And so you're milling your deck selectively in a way by milling 2 by turn, but also like kind of chain calling these units. And so be mindful of your Counterblast. It's not a big deal, but typically you probably use 1 to 2 to 3 Counterblast on a turn just to build up field formation at that point. So those are some key takeaways you want to make sure you have in mind. And then the other 7C's unit that we have is Rise Tutor. So this is where you intercept from the back row, actually is vital. This unit gets the intercept ability if there's a marker on this unit circle. So for example, again, if you have a Protect 2 circle on it, it gets this skill. It doesn't have to be a treasure marker. Sometimes you may need to go to Protect 2 to actually get that marker count to help with Slash Shade and Rise Tutor at that point, exactly. And so just to help with the deck overall, Negerbone is needed too, I feel, with any Grand Blue deck, to be honest. Not only that has a drop zone effect, but it allows you to discard a card to call something else. And so what it does, it allows you to fill up your drop zone and then call whatever you need. That might be, let's say, discarding a Slash Shade, right? And then you call a Night Spinal by when you have 10 or more cards. Then Night Spinal can just call back the Slash Shade, for example. And so really you just kind of like, here's 2 units, and I really maximize on that value as well, and setting up that cycle. And then of course Negerbone is actually going to bottom deck itself, so that way you can start forming that stack too. But that's a very key unit just to be able to call any 7C's units that you want to build off. And it might be just reviving Slash Shades at that point too, especially if you want to have 2, 3, 4 Slash Shades over here just to really start hitting that hammer on that turn, especially if you got the 6 treasure or more. With the trigger lineup, honestly, the 4 heal with the 8 crit and the 4 drop, that's a little more important because the deck doesn't really generate advantage as easily compared to Night Rose. So that's one of the weaknesses from this deck. If you get Massive Retire, you can rebuild your field, but you could only do that once or twice, and after that, you run out of gas. You're falling behind, especially if you don't have a good start. You kind of are falling behind, and you have to catch up. And so that's why draw triggers are more important in order to get that +1 when you drive check and when you damage check them. Not only that, they're PGs, so it allows us to discard key pieces. So be mindful of that, but ideally we want to drive check them and we want to damage check them. That's the important thing. And then of course we have Protect. If we go to Protect 2, then we don't have that Protect 1 marker to be a Sentinel. And so maybe having that 4 PGs really comes up more than it has before if you play Cocytus or Night Rose, where you typically go to Protect 1 just to get those Sentinel PGs at that point. And then the 8 crit you wanted there, be mindful of your crit placement. And so if you have a Vanguard attack that is going through and you drive a crit trigger, and you have a rear guard that is a 7C's unit that can still attack, I would suggest not putting the crit on the Vanguard because it gives them 2 damage and it gives them another chance to get a damage trigger. This deck can actually get hurt with triggers being damage checked, and so that is something to be mindful for. And also it allows you to kind of limit the CB that you want to give them. Again, if you are attacking, you could attack your opponent's rear guards to still get those treasure markers. So be mindful of that, so that way you take full advantage of your attacks without losing to a damage check trigger at that point. I hope that really makes a lot of sense. And so, the strengths and weaknesses, again, like I mentioned, it's really hard for this deck to continually reviving its field. Night Rose has a better job. Part of it is because Night Rose has the Battle Phase Revival skill that can call 2 units. Night Mist does not have that. Night Mist is stuck to the continuous effects of basically setting up the 7 Seas rearguards to do stuff and doing the work for it. So your only form of advantage, again, Night Spinal, Columbard, Necrolazy, and then of course your draw triggers at that point. Of course, we want your starter, get a ticket. You can really play around with discarding cards with that. That could be discarding the ticket to get another piece, however you want to see fit. So those are the couple things that you want to be mindful for. Honestly, it's a fun deck. It's more of a casual build. I mean, you can take it to an event and do your best to get first, second, third place. But if I were me, I would definitely pick Night Rose. It's just more resilient at that point. Where this deck, you have to practice some of your matchups to find out what is the best strategy against a certain matchup. And when your deck is a lot more resilient, you don't have to worry about that as much. You just worry about your opponent. And that's really what matters, especially in big events, where you're actually being mindful of your opponent. So everything else that you do play-wise is muscle memory at that point. So again, this is more of a casual fun deck. If you want to see different builds, Ames4 actually did one with the Hyper Mill. He put Navigators in there. So if you're a big fan of Navigator, check out that deck profile. I'll link it down in the description. You could also see G Station's profile. He's a more budget-friendly deck profile for that. And so he doesn't play the Columbard. He made a joke like, why do we don't play Columbard? It's because we're broke. You know, and what's kind of cool with the aesthetic with 7 Seas, I love Night Mist. With what's cool is that when the units hit a rearguard or a vanguard on the opponent's side, that treasure marker gaining, it's almost like you're stealing from them, and you're stealing their treasure from their booty, right? So it's like, that's kind of cool having that aesthetic in there. So just be mindful of that, and I hope this is something that you guys enjoyed and play with. Feel free to tinker with, tweak it to as like you please. And if you guys have any feedback or comments or like to add any changes to this deck profile, feel free to comment down below. I'd love to hear your feedback as well. Hopefully in the future, I might even do a real life deck profile to see what I learned from this template to going into the real life deck profile. And you'd like to see that, let me know too in the comments as well. And again, thanks again to MachinaBlau with this program. It's fantastic. As you can see, it's beautiful. I found that cheat code to change the background to make it look like the, the official Grand Blue commission art that I had for my channel and for the blog as well. And again, if you're new to the channel, there is a Grand Blue blog called Rogue of the 7 Seas. You can find it in the description or in the channel's description as well. It's called Rogue of the 7 Seas.wordpress.com. Very simple. Has a lot of Grand Blue contact that you can refer to. So see you guys, amigos. Bye.